So I really want to teach abroad in China, but I'm worried about getting scammed. How do I make sure that my job's actually legitimate and high paying and awesome with all the benefits that they promise me without experiencing any of those horror stories that I read about online or see on YouTube? Well, if that's you, if you are at all worried about how to find a good job in China and not getting scammed, this is the video for you. Hey everyone, my name is Rochelle from Adventures Around Asia, and today we are going to be talking about how to find an awesome, high-paying job in China that's not a scam. Now, so many people, they come to China for 1 year, and they either apply to like a large chain training center that we've all heard of, or a teach abroad program, mainly because they're worried about getting scammed. They want to go with a reputable name, somebody either their university recommended or a company that they've heard of. But then they end up with this sort of subpar job. They get to China and they realize there are just so many other opportunities out there that are better than the job that they have. And then they end up staying in China for another year or 2 or 5 and get these much better positions. And they're like, man, I really wish that I had this kind of job the first time around. So how do we find those jobs and avoid the sort of subpar positions that sort of prey off first-year teachers who don't know any better, me, or those scam jobs where they like actually aggressively go after people, also me, that don't know any better, and then you end up with this position and you're miserable, right? So how do we find these awesome high-paying jobs and avoid the either subpar or scam jobs? That's what our video is all about today. So today I'm going to give you 5 major tips to find an awesome high-paying job in China that's not a scam. So the very first tip that I have is to avoid teach abroad programs. Now, if you know me, if you've read my blog, if you've gone to any of my webinars, you probably know that I'm not a huge fan of teach abroad programs, mainly from personal experience, but I am familiar with other teach abroad programs aside from just the one that I used. But here's the reason why I don't like them. Chances are if you use a teach abroad program, you're not going to get totally scammed, but really the schools that these teach abroad programs use are kind of subpar. Firstly, your salary is going to be much lower, and you're not going to have much of a choice of which schools that you can go to, right? And if you're confused, if you're like, what's a teach abroad program? Basically, a teach abroad program is a program that you apply to, and then you're accepted into the program, and usually there's a Facebook group and an orientation and this and that, and then they place you at a school. Now, I'm not knocking all placements, right? If you get a job through your TEFL program or a recruiter, that's fine, as long as you have a say in where you're placed, and they have different jobs with different varying salaries, so you can actually negotiate. But if you just apply to a program where everyone gets a blanket salary and they just place you at a school, and they may or may not take your own requests about location and job type into consideration, this is not an ideal situation. Mainly because these teach abroad programs, they suck you into the program and then they give you your school at the absolute last second, usually just a month or 2 before, if that. And then basically it's like take it or leave it. So this kind of puts you in a position where you've already made friends, you've already become involved in the Facebook group, and you don't want to be a quitter. And you don't have time to apply anywhere else either if you want to start in September, if you really want to work at a public or private school. So you get sucked into this program, you don't feel like you can say no, so you end up taking a position that you wouldn't normally have wanted. Not to give a whole backstory or anything, but I really wanted to be in Nanjing, and so I worked really hard to get all my paperwork in super fast, hoping that I would be placed in a school that was in my top preferences. Nanjing, Hangzhou, Suzhou were my top ones. And I was one of the first people to be placed, but they put me in Ningbo, in the middle of nowhere on a factory land highway where I was the only foreigner for miles. Now, if that was the experience that I wanted, that would have been fine. But that was not the experience that I wanted, at least for that first year. So I kind of felt like, okay, if I don't take this position, I'm a quitter. But that's not okay, right? And also, let's look at the salary too. I mean, I was only making 5,000 RMB per month. Now I believe this program pays 6,000 RMB per month, but that's really low, okay? I mean, we're not doing a whole video on salaries today, but that's pretty low, and there was no room for me to negotiate or anything. I mean, and even if you were in Shanghai, you were still only making the same as me in the middle of nowhere in Ningbo, which also isn't fair because Shanghai is like 3 times the price at least. So I really don't like these teach abroad programs, mainly because you really don't have a say in your location, in your salary, you can't negotiate. And also, at least my teach abroad program placed me at a school that wasn't legally allowed to hire me. So there's that too. So using a teach abroad program doesn't guarantee that your school is going to be legitimate, because mine wasn't. Now, my next tip is to apply to multiple jobs. Now, this one you might be like, yeah, okay, like sure, that's an easy tip. But really, so many people don't do this. They apply to one job and then they are immediately like offered an interview and then a contract, and then they're like, oh wow, like they just get so swept up in the process that they end up accepting this position and never actually apply anywhere else. So people, they only apply to one job, they don't shop around, and then they just take a subpar position without comparing offers. I highly, highly suggest applying to multiple jobs so that you can sort of compare offers, see what people are giving you, compare locations, compare salaries, and choose a position that's right for you. Because a lot of people don't know this, but the industry in China is desperate for foreign teachers. Okay, so all of these schools want you, so you should have your pick and be able to shop around. There's no reason to just take the first position that's offered to you if it's not perfect or exactly what you want. Now, granted, there is no such thing as perfect, like, right? Even if you get your dream job, it's not perfect. But you should be able to shop around and negotiate and compare offers. And if you only apply to one position, you just can't do that. Now, that kind of brings me actually to my third point, which is don't let anybody pressure you into taking a job like right away, right? So many of these schools, once you finish the interview, they decide they want you, they immediately give you a contract and they're like, yes, can you let us know by the end of the week? If that. Some of them are like, can you let us know like immediately? Take 2 days. And that, obviously, I know a lot of people who follow my advice and apply to multiple jobs. I mean, many of my course students in the Teach Abroad Squad are going through this right now. They have applied to multiple jobs, and now all the schools are like, please tell us right now if you want to come. But they're still waiting back or trying to have interviews at other schools. Don't let them pressure you. It's not like they're going to give your job away. I mean, if the school really is perfect and like your dream school and you're like, this is fantastic, it's super high paying, this is way better than I thought it was going to be, okay, sure, take it. But, I mean, those types of jobs do kind of get competitive. But for the most part, most of these schools, they're not going to give your position away unless you take like months to respond, okay? So if you need to take an extra week to look at another offer from another school, that's fine. You don't have to immediately take a job that's offered to you. Don't let them pressure you into just accepting a job right away. Plus, we'll go through this later, but you want to do some research too before you accept a job. So do not let anybody pressure you into being like, immediately within the next 2 days, you need to tell us whether or not you're coming. Just say, hey, I need to take a little bit of time, go through the contract, research the school in the area, and I'll get back to you within 2 weeks. Okay? No pressure, all right? Now, tip number 4 is to analyze your contract. And this is where we get a little nerdy and a little boring. And a lot of times people, especially me, get this contract in their first year and they look it over and it's very confusing and has a lot of big words, and they're like, okay, this all looks fine, especially if you use like a recruiter or a large company or a teach abroad program. You kind of think, oh, these contracts are all standard. But they're not. Every single contract at every school is completely different. And sometimes they slip stuff in there where, like, in very small fine print, where when I look at it now with 5 years of experience, I'm like, I don't like that, right? So I'm seeing a lot of things now where you literally get 0 sick days, and if you miss a day, you have to forfeit some of your salary and get a doctor's note. And I'm like, are you kidding me? So if I have like Ladudza and I ate something sketchy and I need to spend the entire day on the toilet, I need to go to the hospital and get a doctor's certificate, and I lose part of my pay for that day? Right? It's a small thing, but that adds up, especially if your stomach's not used to Chinese food. You want a couple sick days in there, right? So like, it's just something that I'm skimming through a contract, I'm like, this looks great, and then I see this small thing in there where I'm like, really? Like 0 sick days, 0 paid sick days, and I have to get a doctor's note? That's ridiculous, right? Like, I'm sorry, but I'm not signing that contract. Or I see a lot of now people not reimbursing you for your flight until you've been there for the entire year. And I'm like, okay, but obviously A lot of schools are starting to go this way, and I still don't really agree with it. I still think you should get reimbursed sooner rather than later. So I'm seeing a lot of these little things in contracts that people miss. Now, people also miss really big things in contracts too. For example, when I first showed up at that school in the middle of nowhere on a factory line highway where I was the only foreigner for miles, I was given this contract and they were like, it's all standard, please sign it, we need to get started on your visa right away, because of course I had arrived on a tourist visa, another mistake that I made. But so they gave me this contract, put it right on my face and said, please sign it. And I didn't take the time to really scan through that contract with a fine-toothed comb. There was a stipulation in that contract that if I wanted to leave early, I could owe my school up to $8,000 US, which was my entire salary for the entire school year. Did I mention I was underpaid? Yeah. So because it was an RMB and I didn't take out my calculator and figure it out, I could have owed my school literally my entire salary for the entire year if I wanted to leave early. So really take the time to understand your contract, and especially understand what I like to call your escape clause. Now, the escape clause is what you need to do if you want to leave your school early. If you decide, I hate this school, I really want to change, I found a much better position, I want to leave. What do you have to do? Because teaching abroad in China is a little bit different than back home. In the US, I usually only have to give 2 weeks notice if I wanted to leave a job. In China, it's not like that, because they just spent so much time and energy finding you, paying potentially a recruiter or teach abroad program or TEFL provider to find you, paying for your visa, flying you over, getting you trained, getting you set up, providing you an apartment. All of these things take time. Finding a replacement for you also takes time. So you can't just give 2 weeks notice. A lot of jobs either make you forfeit some of your salary, not $8,000 worth, but maybe half a month's salary, or you need to give them 2 or 3 months notice. What do you need to do if you don't like your job and you want to leave? Really, really be aware of that, okay? And what kind of things can the school do that would void your contract? For example, if your school's not paying you on time, does that void your entire contract and now you're entitled to leave whenever you want? Right? So really look at that escape clause. And I'm not trying to scare you. I'm just trying to make sure that you don't get into a position that I was in where you feel trapped and you're like, well, I don't want to leave China, but I can't move to another school, so what am I going to do? Right? Ideally, you would have a somewhat fair escape clause, so if you did want to switch to another school, it's not going to be like a huge disaster financially for you. Now, my 5th tip to find an awesome high-paying job and avoid getting scammed is to research your school. Okay, so that involves a lot of extensive Googling and looking at pictures and potentially talking to current foreign employees. Basically what you want to do is you want to research your school and see what people are saying. Look for reviews. Okay, if you're working for like a bigger like chain training center, obviously there's going to be a lot of stuff. Just keep in mind, literally every single school, I would be really surprised if they didn't have a negative review, okay? Negative reviews are par for the course, obviously, but what I want you to look for is consistent, similar negative reviews. So if one person's like, my manager was annoying, and it's a chain training center with schools all over Eastern China, okay, chances are you won't have that manager, right? But if multiple people are saying similar things, like multiple people are saying the manager's horrible, the manager's horrible, the manager's horrible, and they're all based in different locations, I'd be like, ooh, maybe the management at this center as a whole is not good, right? This company doesn't have a good management policy. I would also look for like major red flags, like people saying that they weren't given the things that they were promised in their contract, or they weren't getting paid on time, or they never got their flight reimbursement, or things like that, or they showed up and their provided apartment was horrific. Those types of things are huge red flags, so definitely look for those. Now, I'm sure that some of you who have already been doing this are wondering, okay, Rochelle, I tried to do this, and I typed my school's name into Google, and there is literally nothing. Nothing. That's actually normal. If you're working at especially a public school that only hires maybe 1 or 2 foreign teachers total, there might not be any reviews online in English, right? Like from foreign teachers. So what you need to do, chances are if that's the case, you're using a recruiter or a teach abroad program. If that's the case, you need to well, firstly, not use a Teach Abroad program, but you need to research your recruiter, basically. Google them, look at what people are saying about them. Do they have a nice website? Do they have good reviews? Okay, so you really want to look for that sort of thing if there's no reviews about your school in particular. You also want to look for photos. Are there photos of the school? Are there photos of the classroom? Chances are, if you work at a public school in China, there's at least some information about the school online, even if it is in Chinese, right? So maybe you can at least see pictures of the school or write-ups about the school. You can click through and see photos of the classroom. You also want to ask for the exact address of your school. Type it into Google or Apple Maps and see where it is. I made the mistake of not doing this the first time around, and my school was in the middle of nowhere, so that was cool. So now what I do is whenever I'm offered a position in China, I type the exact address into Google Maps, look at the city, see where it is in the city. So for example, I had like a high-level college counseling job in Beijing. I typed that into Google Maps, saw the area. I was actually familiar with the area since I'd been to Beijing before, and I was like, you know what, this is perfect, right? Good location. I could see that basically my office was located in a mall. There were lots of shops around. It was right next to a subway stop, and I was like, great. Like, I'm in the city. I've got things around me. This is going to be fantastic. So you really want to know exactly where your school is and if it's in the middle of nowhere. Now, granted, if you want to be in the middle of nowhere, that's fine, right? More power to you. But if you really want to be around things like in a city with other expats and like lots of things to do, lots of restaurants, you really need to check where your school is, because a lot of times they say your school is in a particular city, but Chinese cities are actually much larger than, let's say, American cities. So for example, Ningbo, if it was in the US, it would have been 2 cities plus a rural area, right? There'd be like downtown Ningbo, there would be like the seaport area, and then the rural area where I lived would probably be like a town. So, but in China, that's all Ningbo. It's all one city. So the size, the actual physical area of Chinese cities are huge, huge. So you really need to make sure that you know exactly where your school is. Another thing that you can do is ask to speak to a current foreign teacher. A lot of schools or programs will allow you to do this. I mean, some schools and programs even have like reviews from people that they've posted on YouTube. And of course, those are going to be positive. But definitely, you know, do your research. Make sure you understand your school. Take the time to research your school and be picky. And why? I mean, sure, yeah, it's an adventure. Like, you can just show up at whatever school and make the most of it, and that's fine if that's what you want to do. But wouldn't it be great if you could really enjoy your school and your location and have a wonderful experience while you're in China, right? You don't have to just take whatever school is offered to you. You can be a little bit choosy and pick the experience that's right for you. I mean, you are moving to China after all, and there are so many jobs that are dying to have you. There's no need to just pick these bottom of the barrel kind of jobs that look for the new foreign teachers who've never been to China before. Now, just as a bonus, I have one final tip for you to find an awesome high-paying job in China that's not a scam, and that is to apply early. Okay, so if you want to arrive in September, you should have already been applying now. So if you have not started applying it at all, please get on it, okay? You ideally, for a September start, would want to start looking at schools in May, applying the beginning of June, just to make sure that you have plenty of time to look through jobs and get your visa. Okay, you don't want to just apply for jobs at the last minute and be super rushed and have to take whatever job is given to you and potentially arrive on the wrong visa. You want to start applying early, okay? Like, I'm talking like 5 months early, okay? So if this is something that you really want to do in September, please get on it now. If it's something that you really want to do, you know, later on in the year, maybe you're working at a training center, definitely start looking at jobs about 5 months early. Any earlier than 6 months, they'll be like, why aren't you coming sooner? Okay, like, it's a little bit too early to start applying. Like, don't start applying for jobs like 8-9 months out. Like, that's a little bit too early. But definitely like 5 months or so early. Like, start looking in May for a September job. That's sort of the sweet spot. Just so you have enough time to get your visa, you're not rushed. You can find a school that's right for you. If the first few schools that you apply to don't look good, you can start applying to more schools, just so you have time. Because it's when you're rushed And that's how these teach abroad programs get you, by giving you your school at the last minute. When you're rushed, when you don't have time to get your visa, you don't have time to apply anywhere else. If you want to start in September, you've got to go now. That's how they get you, right? So apply early so you have plenty of time. Now, I'm sure some of you are watching this right now being like, man, that girl is picky. Like, I just want to have an experience and an adventure and live in China, and I don't care if I make a lot of money, and even if I'm in the middle of nowhere, it'll be an experience. And that was me. I was happy to go on the adventure. I just wanted the experience of living and working in China for a year, and I wasn't picky. I was very, go with the flow, like, yeah, it's gonna be a great experience. But when you do that, yes, you do have an adventure, but it might not have been the adventure that you were envisioning. If you're stressed about money, if you live in the middle of nowhere and the bus stops running at 7 p.m. and all of your friends live 45 minutes away in the city, you're gonna feel left out when you can't just grab dinner after work with them. When all of your coworkers live 20 minutes away by car and they're all married with a kid and you have no one to hang out with after class, you're gonna feel left out again. If you are having a low salary and you're a little bit stressed about money, you're not going to have that fun experience. You're not going to be able to save up and travel during your breaks. If you are in the middle of nowhere and you're not around any fun restaurants or activities or things to do, you're going to spend a lot of time in your room drinking way too much wine and watching way too much Netflix. And that was the experience that I had my first year, was that I really wanted to be enjoying my life in China and enjoying my expat experience. And I did eventually. I realized, Rochelle, you've got to make this work. Like, you can't just be miserable. But it was much harder for me to really enjoy that expat experience when I was worried about getting paid on time and, having to try and catch the last bus into town and then sleeping on a friend's couch because I couldn't make it back home in time. Or I was stressed about having to pay, $20 for a taxi when I was only making, what was it, like $600 a month or something like that. So ideally, you want to find an awesome job in China so that you can enjoy your experience. And you don't have to be super, super picky about the city that you're in or the age range that you teach. That's fine. But you do want to find an awesome, at least somewhat high-paying job that's not a scam, because obviously if you get scammed or if your school's not paying you on time or you hate your job because your manager's awful, you're not going to have a fun adventure. You're going to have an adventure, but it's not going to be fun, right? So my goal for you is that you really enjoy your China experience, whether it's 1 year or 5 years or 10 years, whatever it is. The first time around, right? We want you to have an amazing first year in China. So the way to do that is to be a little picky, to apply around, to advocate for yourself, negotiate your contract, avoid those big teach abroad programs where they just give you a school at the last minute, all right? Because you deserve to have an awesome adventure in China, and I really want to make sure that you have that. So that said, if you really want to find an awesome, high-paying job in China that's not a scam, I actually created a really awesome guide for you guys that you can download. I have the link below. It's called 10 Steps to Finding an Awesome, High-Paying Job in China. So you can download that, look through that, and that really walks you through the entire process from getting your TOEFL to applying through jobs, negotiating your contract, all the way to arriving in China. We go through the entire process. Getting your visa is another step. So it'll really walk you through the entire process, and you'll have all of the information right there, easy to access, so you can just download that from the link below. But now I want to know, do you have any other tips for people to find an awesome high-paying job in China that's not a scam? Or do you have any major questions? Is there something that you want me to elaborate on, to make another video on? Please write a comment below, because I'm always looking for new comments and questions. It might give me some inspiration to come up with another awesome video for you guys. So if you have any major tips or questions, be sure to write in a comment below. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe so you can easily see new videos and updates from me all about expat life and teaching abroad in China. So that's all for today, and see you soon.